A 23-year-old college student from Taiwan was forced to have both of his legs amputated after suffering severe frostbite that his doctor couldn't believe was real. He claimed it was the result of being stuck outside after a bad motorcycle accident, but the truth was he'd stuck his legs in dry ice for more than 10 hours while trying to pull off a massive insurance fraud scheme. His friend and accomplice tied him to the chair, so he had no choice but to endure the excruciating ice burns. Instead of the $1.7 million payout they were hoping for, both of the young men were sent to prison for insurance fraud. This photo of Samantha Koenig was taken by serial killer Israel Keys to convince the victim's family that she was still alive, so that he could demand $30,000 in ransom from them for her safe return. But in reality, Koenig had already been dead for several weeks, and Keys had sewn her eyes open using fishing line. The family paid some of the ransom before the killer dumped Samantha's body in a lake and never contacted them again. In 2004, 40-year-old Marion Carver set out on a week-long Alaskan cruise by herself. Just 2 days into the voyage, her steward noticed that she was missing, but was told by his supervisor to just do your job and forget about it. Therefore, the woman's disappearance went unreported, and at the end of the cruise, most of her belongings were allegedly disposed of. Carver was only reported missing by her father more than a week after she disappeared, when she never returned home from her trip. To this day, no trace of her has ever been found, as her fate remains a total mystery. In 1963, a stray tuxedo cat named Félicette became the first and only cat to go to space. She was launched by French scientists and spent 15 minutes in a rocket before returning to Earth. She was euthanized shortly afterwards so scientists could study her brain. In 1998, Polish college student Katarzyna Zawada went missing when she was supposed to meet up with her mom. A few months later, a tugboat suddenly stopped working because a pile of human skin got stuck in the propeller. When the remains were examined, it was determined that the skin was deliberately removed from the torso while the limbs and head were cut off. DNA testing soon linked it to the missing woman, and researchers eventually concluded that her murderer had been wearing her skin as a bodysuit. This woman was caught on camera doing something deeply disturbing to win a chess match. Earlier this year, Russian pro chess player Amina Abakarova apparently needed a way to knock her opponent out of a tournament. So she decided to go to the extreme and poison the woman, 30-year-old Ume Osmanova, in what's being treated as an assassination attempt. Amina poured mercury from a thermometer onto the victim's chessboard before her next match and smeared it all over her side of the board with one of the pieces. Osmanova said she began feeling unwell during her match 30 minutes later, complaining of sudden severe nausea and dizziness, prompting an immediate call for medical assistance. After the security footage was reviewed by authorities, Amina had no choice but to confess to the murder attempt. Osmanova ended up making a full recovery, as the attacker was banned from future chess competitions and stripped of her previous titles. Abakarova now potentially faces several years in Russian prison for the senseless attack. In 2017, 16-year-old cross-country runner Patrick Cooper was participating in a mountain race in Alaska when he suddenly took a wrong turn and became lost. At some point, Patrick called his family members and informed them that he was being chased by an aggressive black bear. His mangled corpse was eventually found by another runner who went searching for Patrick after finishing the race. In the year 2000, Pakistani archaeologists announced the incredible discovery of an ancient mummy, believed to be the daughter of Persian King Xerxes the Great. This sparked a heated diplomatic dispute, with both Iran and Pakistan fighting over ownership of the amazing find. However, after closer examination, museum curators discovered that the mummy was actually a woman who died from blunt force trauma in 1996. It may have even been the victim of a violent murder. Several people were arrested for the massive hoax, but the woman's identity and the details surrounding her death remain unclear to this day. Liam Neeson's wife, actress Natasha Richardson, was taking a beginner ski lesson on a bunny hill when she suddenly fell without a helmet on. She initially refused any medical help but complained about a severe headache a few hours later. Richardson was soon flown to the hospital, where she died 2 days later from a brain bleed. A park ranger on Rinka Island once sat down in his office and was attacked by a Komodo dragon hiding under his desk. Turns out the cleaner had accidentally left the door open the night before and the massive lizard snuck inside. The ranger received 30 stitches at the hospital and managed to survive, but has since quit his job and now suffers from PTSD. Harvard Law School professor Roger Fisher had an interesting idea to prevent the unjustified launch of nuclear weapons. He proposed implanting the U.S. nuclear launch codes inside a person's body next to their heart, so that the president would have to take a life in order to activate the country's nuclear weapons. A 22-year-old woman from Ireland was recently left with severe internal injuries after her butt plug was pulled through her body during an MRI scan. She apparently believed she was safe to insert it before the procedure, believing the plug was made entirely of silicone. But it actually contained a metal core, causing it to react to the scanner's powerful magnets. She's expected to recover in the hospital, but this is why doctors always say you should never wear a butt plug while getting an MRI. In another ridiculous MRI case in 2023, a Brazilian lawyer tragically died after a scanner caused his gun to fire inside of the machine. After being repeatedly asked by doctors to remove all metal objects, Leandro Novaes decided not to reveal that he had a gun in his waistband, which ended up firing into his stomach. He spent several weeks in the hospital before succumbing to his costly bad decision. This case was a big reason why doctors always remind their patients to remove any firearms before receiving an MRI. This was the last photo ever taken of Marco Siffredi, the first man to descend Mount Everest on a snowboard. He was attempting his second descent in 2002 when Sherpas urged him not to go due to bad weather conditions, but Siffredi ignored their warnings and was never seen again. In 1999, Little League baseball player Kevin Stephen was hit in the chest by a baseball bat, causing his heart to suddenly stop. Luckily, off-duty nurse Penny Brown was in attendance and saved the boy's life by giving him CPR. 7 years later, Penny Brown was choking at a restaurant when one of the workers rushed over to give her the Heimlich maneuver, thus saving her life. That worker was Kevin Stephen. Jacques Hebert was a revolutionary French journalist during the Reign of Terror, who was heavily in favor of beheading anyone who disagreed with his radical views. After he accused Marie Antoinette of incest with her son, Hebert was sentenced to death via guillotine. He reportedly fainted several times on the way to his execution and screamed hysterically when placed under the blade. To amuse the crowd and make a statement, the executioners rigged the blade to stop inches from Hebert's neck. They did this 3 times before finally executing him on the 4th attempt. Known for playing Thanos in Season 2 of Squid Game, actor Top is an actual rapper in the K-pop group Big Bang who fell out of the spotlight for several years. When he was serving his mandatory military service in 2017, Top was busted for marijuana use and suspended from his duty. A few days after being discharged, the rapper was found unconscious in police barracks after overdosing on Xanax. He had attempted to take his own life and spent nearly a week recovering in the hospital. As the Nazi regime gained power, actor Lionel Royce lost his job and began receiving death threats for being a Jew. So he took refuge in the Alps, grew a beard, and dyed all of his hair by bathing in diluted hydrogen. He then returned to Germany claiming to be a self-taught peasant actor, and was eventually praised by the Nazis as proof of superiority of Aryan blood. Colombian man Christian Montenegro, who claims to be engaged to a ragdoll, has revealed that his fiancée Natalia is pregnant with their 3rd child. He also shared his plans for a dream wedding with his beloved partner, with whom he already has a son and daughter. When questioned about his bizarre relationship, Montenegro replied, "If it weren't for the dolls, I'd be more alone than anyone. At least I have something." And Christian certainly isn't the first person to fall in love and start a family with a ragdoll. In 2022, Maravone Marias had an actual wedding ceremony with her ragdoll husband Marcelo that was attended by 250 people. But the woman has recently expressed serious doubt in their relationship after she caught her husband cheating on her with another woman at a local motel. In Connecticut, 1986, 39-year-old flight attendant Helly Crafts was brutally murdered by her husband Richard after she caught him cheating on her. He then put her body through a wood chipper and ground her remains into a lake. Richard was sentenced to 50 years in prison but has since been released. Today would have been the 50th birthday of Iranian filmmaker Babak Karamdan. In 2021, he was murdered by his parents in an honor killing for still being single at the age of 46. Babak's parents confessed to drugging and stabbing their son several times, later stating that they were proud of their actions and showed no remorse. An Indiana judge recently ruled that taxpayers will be funding the sex reassignment surgery of a vicious murderer in prison. Jonathan Richardson was convicted of fatally strangling his 11-month-old stepdaughter in 2001. The ruling filing states that the surgery is a medical necessity that is required to prevent a risk of serious bodily and psychological harm. Earlier this year, 21-year-old Texas woman Juniper Bryson was charged with attempting to sell her newborn baby on Facebook. She agreed to sell her newborn to the highest bidder but was only hoping for $200. Bryson was messaged by various people and told them she just needed enough money to pay for her DoorDash food and to move into a new apartment. She was reported to police by a couple she blocked on Facebook for asking if they could adopt her baby the legal way. Studies have shown that obese drivers are 80% more likely to die in a car accident than drivers who are not overweight. Earlier this year, 2 Brazilian influencers drowned during a yacht party after the boat was capsized by a massive wave. The women likely would have survived the tragedy had they worn life jackets, but reportedly didn't want to ruin their tans in selfies. If you were to remove all the blood vessels in your body and tie them together, they would stretch across the entire circumference of the earth 2 to 4 times. In 2023, a woman's leg became trapped at the end of a movable walkway at an airport in Thailand. Her leg was so deeply stuck that emergency crews had no choice but to amputate it below the knee in order to free her. She was quickly rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors were unable to reattach her leg. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. This is the harrowing skull of a man with Proteus syndrome, a rare and awful condition characterized by the overgrowth of skin, organs, tissues, and bones. Nikola Tesla originally expected to live to the age of 150, but later lowered this estimate to 135 years when he was forced to give up alcohol due to prohibition. He thought that consuming alcohol was good for the body and was a heavy drinker as a result. Tesla ended up dying at the age of 86. When revolutionary hero Guy Fawkes was convicted of high treason in 1605, his punishment was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, meaning he would be hanged almost to the point of death, have his intestines and sex organs removed while still alive, decapitated, and have his limbs torn off. After the sentencing, Fawkes said "fuck that" and leapt from the gallows so that the rope broke his neck and killed him immediately. The drawing and quartering was still performed on his corpse, and his body parts were paraded around London. This surveillance image shows 14-year-old Noah Donahoe riding his bike fully unclothed on the day he went missing while apparently heading to meet some friends in Belfast. 6 days later, his body was discovered in a storm drain with an autopsy confirming drowning as the cause of death, but his family is convinced he was murdered. Earlier this year, 41-year-old Ohio mother Tamara Banks was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the death of her daughter. Banks and her husband fed the girl almost nothing but Mountain Dew through a baby bottle, causing her teeth to rot and a severe case of diabetes, which eventually killed her. During a Taiwanese concert in 2015, a large amount of colored cornstarch powder was sprayed into a crowd of 1,000 people, creating a dense dust cloud of flammable powder in the air. The powder suddenly ignited near the stage, causing a massive fireball that quickly spread throughout the crowd. Despite the fire only lasting about 40 seconds, over 500 people were injured while 17 were killed. This is when streaming gets taken way too far. A Russian YouTuber was recently sentenced to 6 years in a maximum security prison after he allegedly caused his pregnant girlfriend to die from hypothermia during a live stream. Known as Stas Reflay, the streamer reportedly forced his girlfriend onto a freezing cold balcony wearing nothing but her underwear. Sometime later, he pulled her back inside and appeared confused, saying, "Chat, she has no pulse, she's pale, she's not breathing." He then laid her lifeless body on the couch, opened up a bottle of liquor, and continued streaming for an additional 2 hours before authorities finally arrived. The streamer's actions were apparently part of a disturbing trend known as trash streaming that's popular in Russia, where streamers perform dangerous or degrading stunts for donations. According to reports, Stas was sent $1,000 by a viewer to watch him abuse his girlfriend. The 34-year-old only ended his stream after police entered his home and pronounced his girlfriend dead. The 1985 film Mask is based on the true story of Rocky Dennis, an American boy with an extremely rare bone disorder. It causes bone to build up excessively in the skull, resulting in compression of the brain. Doctors initially told him he would die before his 7th birthday, but Rocky ended up living to the age of 16. After being told he would die if he didn't change his habits, a morbidly obese Scottish man went an entire year without eating any food. The 450-pound 27-year-old only consumed multivitamins and potassium tablets for 382 days, only going number 2 once every 40 to 50 days. He set a record for the longest fast ever recorded and ended up losing 275 pounds. French chemist Antoine Lavoisier wanted to perform one last experiment before he was executed in 1792. He told his colleague he would try to blink as long as possible after being beheaded by a guillotine. Some sources say he continued to blink for up to 10 seconds afterwards. In 1995, Johnny Depp saved Courtney Love's life after she overdosed outside of a nightclub in Los Angeles. He performed CPR and managed to revive her before paramedics arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Instead of flowers, people bring sticks to the 120-year-old grave of a dog named Rex. In the year 2000, a passenger on a Philippine Airlines flight hijacked the plane and robbed all the other passengers. He tried escaping using a homemade parachute, but was afraid to jump out and needed a flight attendant to push him. His parachute failed to open and he plummeted to his death while everyone else was unharmed. If Laverne accepts this man's proposal, he will make you the happiest woman on earth. A 2-year-old girl from Turkey was heard screaming from her backyard before neighbors rushed over to check on her. When they reached her, they found a bite mark on her lip and a 2-foot-long snake dead in front of her. She'd apparently been bitten by the snake and killed it by biting it back in revenge. Best known for playing Robbie Rotten in Lazytown, Icelandic actor Stefán Karl Stefánsson was told his pancreatic cancer was inoperable at the young age of 43. He died a few months later and wanted no funeral, instead requesting to have his ashes scattered in secrecy in a distant ocean. He will always be number 1. Throughout South London, you can find large sections of fence made out of stretchers from World War II. They were used by civil authorities to transport the wounded when England was bombed by the Nazis. Gandhi was known to test his purity by sleeping with unclothed girls who were sometimes underage or related to him. Just 2 months after 9/11, another commercial airliner, American Airlines Flight 587, crashed into a Queens, New York neighborhood just after takeoff. 265 people were killed and several homes were completely destroyed. One of the victims had previously survived the 9/11 attacks only to end up dying in another tragedy. Cyclopia is a real congenital disorder marked by the failure of the embryo to properly divide the orbits of the eyes into 2 separate cavities, resulting in a single eye in the middle of the face. It's usually caused by a mutation in the Sonic the Hedgehog gene, real, and typically results in death within a few hours after birth. The tragic condition occurs in 1 out of every 200 miscarried fetuses, and the maximum recorded lifespan of a child born with cyclopia is 1 day. Following the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, people have been putting up wanted posters across New York City targeting other healthcare CEOs. The posters read, "Healthcare CEOs should not feel safe," after his 28-year-old teacher allegedly made creepy remarks to a 6th grade girl. A young student catfished the man and made him think he was talking to a 14-year-old girl. After receiving concerning messages from the teacher, the boy reported him to police and he now faces charges of sexual exploitation. During a trip to Paris in 2007, Prince Harry had his driver go through the same tunnel that his mother Princess Diana died in, at the same speed her car was going at the time, as he was trying to find closure for her death. He later described the attempt as ill-conceived, saying it only brought him more pain as it was just a regular tunnel that nobody should have ever died in. James Heming, the man who introduced mac and cheese to the United States, served as a slave to Thomas Jefferson and took his own life at the young age of 36 after years of suffering from severe alcoholism. Just last year, a 27-year-old model from New York City shot and killed her husband before turning the gun on herself. It was later revealed that she did it to prevent him from finding out that she cheated on him, which would have resulted in their divorce. In 2022, college wrestlers Kendall Cummings and Brad Lowry were hiking in the woods near Yellowstone when Lowry was suddenly attacked by a grizzly bear. Kendall yelled and threw rocks at the bear to no avail, so he decided to jump on its back. This allowed Lowry to escape and get help while Kendall wrestled the bear until it ran off. Despite several deep wounds, both men were rescued and survived. This 2022 photo shows 40-year-old Russian mother Anna Uskova moments before she jumped into a frozen river. She was apparently following a Christian Orthodox tradition of Epiphany and believed that jumping into the frigid water would rid her of sin. However, she jumped in at a bad angle and was quickly swept away by the powerful current, trapping her under the ice. Her husband immediately jumped in to rescue her while their children screamed in horror. But his efforts were unsuccessful and her body was recovered 10 days later. This was the truck belonging to Missouri town bully Ken McElroy after he was killed in broad daylight by an angry mob in 1981. Over the course of his life, McElroy was accused of dozens of felonies, including assault, child molestation, burglary, animal cruelty, arson, and statutory grape. He always managed to escape serving time until eventually being convicted of attempted murder, but McElroy appealed and was released on bond before he immediately threatened to kill several people. An angry mob then showed up at the bar he was drinking at and shot him several times in his truck while he was attempting to leave. Despite over 40 different witnesses, nobody admitted to seeing the murder take place and no one has been charged to this day. Starting when his son Uday was only 11 years old, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein often took the boy to witness his enemies being brutally tortured. These experiences apparently had a profound impact on young Uday, who grew up to become far worse than his father. His own relatives and personal acquaintances were reportedly terrified of him, since Uday was known to grape, torture, and murder anyone who disappointed him. During a dinner party in 1981, Uday murdered his dad's personal valet by repeatedly stabbing him with a carving knife in front of dozens of horrified guests. In 1995, Uday went on a shooting rampage at another party after his uncle made fun of his speech impediment. The shooting left 6 bodyguards dead and his uncle seriously injured, prompting Saddam to set his son's luxury car collection on fire. Uday was also known to arrest and torture Iraqi Olympic athletes when they didn't win a medal. In 2003, Uday was finally killed by an American task force at the age of 39. The career of actor Armie Hammer quickly fell off in 2021 when several women accused him of being an abusive partner and aspiring cannibal. For example, his ex-girlfriend Courtney Vucekovich says their relationship was like dating Hannibal Lecter. She claims he genuinely tried convincing her to remove one of her ribs so that he could barbecue and eat it. In a collection of alleged messages, Armie claimed that he wanted to cut her skin and drink her blood, but that he would stitch her up again so as not to waste a perfect slave. He also wrote about wanting to pounce on her and grape her at knife point while she cried, and wanting to cut off one of her toes to keep a piece of her with him at all times. In response to these disturbing allegations, Armie was quoted saying, "I don't think that's any different than when someone looks at a baby and goes, 'Oh my God, look at those fat little legs. I just want to eat you up.'" Macho Man Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. Russian scientist Anatoly Bogorsky worked as a physicist on the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union. In 1978, he was checking a malfunctioning piece of equipment when one of the safety mechanisms failed, causing a high-energy proton beam to pass directly through his head. He reportedly saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but didn't feel any pain. The beam had burned through parts of his skin, bone, and the brain tissue underneath, causing the left half of his face to swell up beyond recognition. Since it was believed that he received far more than a fatal dose of radiation, Bugorsky was taken to a clinic in Moscow where doctors could document his certain death. But miraculously, Bugorsky survived, completed his PhD, and continued working as a particle physicist. Nearly 50 years later, he's still alive to this day with relatively minor symptoms. This is the skull of a young girl whose remains were found in the trash deposit of a Jamestown fort building in 2013. As evidenced by the butchery marks seen on her forehead, she was believed to be the victim of cannibalism at the Jonestown colony in the winter of 1609. Known as the Starving Time, this period was marked by extreme desperation when it came to finding food due to a severe drought. The governor of Jamestown, George Percy, wrote that colonists ate horses, dogs, cats, vermin, and even dug up corpses from graves to consume. In one case, he reported that a man killed his pregnant wife, butchered her, preserved her with salt, and consumed her. Only 61 out of the original 500 colonists managed to survive the brutal winter.